what we know is wrong. I think of Elizabeth Alexander's poem, Praise Song for the Day, and the stanza which she writes, I know there's something better down the road. We need to find a place where we are safe. We walk into that which we cannot yet see. I also think of the lines in the poem of History and Hope by Miller Williams when he writes, we need to be the people we meant to be, to keep on going where we meant to go. This is why we keep and we must keep writing the 21st century. Because if we stop, who will write us? We must keep moving, keep going as Alexander and Williams suggested for us to do. I think of Robert Lowell when he writes about forgetfulness. We cannot name their names or number their dates. As writers, isn't this one thing we want? To name the names, to account for our days, so they're not forgotten. In all of this labor of writing, there's always beauty. We must not forget that. We must keep writing the 21st century because attacks against immigrants has not ceased. I think of Martin Espadas' poem, Heart of Hunger, in which he writes, smuggled in boxcars through fields of dark morning, tied to bundles at railroad crossings, the brown grain of faces dissolved in bus station dim, immigrants, Mexicano, Dominicano, Guatemalteco, Puerto Riqueño, orphans and travelers refused permission to use gas station toilets, beaten for a beer in unseen towns with white porches, or evaporated without a tombstone in the peaceful grass. And this poem, as well as others that narrate the immigrant experience, really hit home for me. Immigrants, refugees, exiles, not just those making their crossing to America, but to other countries where the word safety is pronounced differently than in your own country. Here I think of the poem, Empire of Dreams by Charles Simic. The opening lines go, on the first page of my dream book, it's always evening in an occupied country. The human body can be a metaphor for a country. Evening can be a metaphor for memory. And the word always can be a word to remember. And so I remember the question that I've been trying to answer for years. What happens when you're 9 years old and you're separated from your parents? You become a writer. You scribble on the margins of notebooks, and often all you write is, I miss you, but in Spanish, the language in which you were first loved. Or maybe you write your mother's name, Ama, nothing more. Because a contraction is a visual form of separation, Mama. No one will read what you write. You smear the letters with the heat of your fingertips. True. You were a tad older than some of the kids separated by 45's zero tolerance policy. And yes, in your case, your parents gave consent, heartbreak in their throats. But still, you were young enough to not have to say, and old enough for the American dream to call on you. They promised you books, promised you a better life than what you would have lived in Mexico. This was the assumption. Back then, everyone believed this. It's believed even now. El Norte, north, where one can sweep dollars off the street, own a washer and dryer, a TV. That's how much abundance there is. Better cross the line than poverty. Better cross the line than stepping on the threatening shadows of gangs and state violence. Don't all parents want the best for their children? As a writer, you keep making the crossing, but now You journey south of the Rio Grande. You went to find your first language, your parents as you left them. The same dirt patio where you walked shirtless and barefoot. What you really want is to find the life that you could have only lived in Spanish. The one you lived for 9 years, and that English, your second language, fails to truly name. You lost everything, and everything has no concrete name, no proper name. Everything doesn't have a country, a playground, a home. Does it ever? You're in exile forever. Its essential sadness can never be surmounted, proclaims Edward Said. Maybe he's right, and maybe you are too, and this is why you're right. Because even if you own a house, you have no home. Because even if you own a dresser for your clothes, an invisible suitcase always waits for you by the door, full of the invisible things that you will carry with you. Where are you going? Not sure you even know. But your upbringing doesn't let you forget that you have no true ground to stand on. Half of you is invested in the poem's next line, and half of you is always waiting for goodbyes. This is what your being is composed of. 2 languages with 2 different lexicons, bordered by one constant, loss. English is never enough. Spanish is never enough. Language is never enough. And yet, it is the only home you truly know. The only country where you can be a stranger and still be welcomed. And you keep searching for it, reaching for it. Like the first time you rode a bus from a town in Tamaulipas to a small town in the Rio Grande Valley, to the place where toddlers are now held in tender age detention centers. See their wide open mouths crying for their mothers. Some so young they can't imagine the word mother. How many of them must have tried to say no te vayas in English? How many of them will write their trauma on the margins of notebooks? What role will language play in their lives as they try to articulate their sense of displacement in the world, their incessant sense of dislocation? How many of them will simply not remember? And yet, you can't really say how a separation of this magnitude will affect the children in the course of their lives. You can only speak for yourself. And this is what you're doing here on this page, telling the world that you haven't forgotten and that your whole life has been a quest to find the right words to say, I remember. Because as a writer, you feel the need to speak up. Because as a writer, you must speak up. This is no time to be silent. This is a time to raise beauty to the fist it can be, to say enough, basta. Because that first time you stepped on a bus that would drive you 400 miles north, away from your parents, your brother was with you. He was 8. And both of you stood on the aisle of that crowded bus, looking out the half-open window, watching your mother in tears, her body not waving goodbye. What for? If she had, half the sky would have been erased by her hand.